In a bustling city courthouse, the air was thick with tension. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs as people shuffled into their seats, waiting for the day's proceedings to begin. Among the crowd sat two police officers, Officer Daniels and Officer Grayson. They were seasoned veterans of the force, proud of their years of service, but also known for their harsh attitudes and prejudiced views. Today, they weren't just spectators. They were key witnesses in a case that had already drawn whispers of controversy. At the defense table sat Maya Carter, a young black woman whose calm demeanor masked the storm brewing inside her. She appeared ordinary at first glance. Dressed simply, her hair tied back in a neat bun, her hands resting on the table in front of her. To most people in the room, she looked like someone who might easily blend into the background. But there was something about her presence that felt different, though no one could quite put their finger on it. Her eyes carried a sharpness, a quiet intelligence that hinted at more than met the eye. Beside Maya sat her public defender, a nervous-looking rookie attorney named Sarah. Sarah flipped through papers, trying to appear confident, but beads of sweat formed on her forehead. This was her first big courtroom appearance, and she wasn't sure how to handle the weight of the accusations against her client. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, a stern man in his 50s with a reputation for being ruthless, was busy organizing his files, ready to present what he believed was an open and shut case. The charges against Maya seemed straightforward enough. According to the police report, she had been caught shoplifting from a high-end boutique late one evening. When confronted by Officers Daniels and Grayson, she allegedly resisted arrest and even tried to flee. It was a story they had told countless times before, always with the same outcome: guilty verdicts and satisfied nods from those who believed criminals deserved no mercy. But this time, things were far from ordinary. Unbeknownst to anyone in the room, not even Sarah, Maya's own lawyer, the defendant sitting quietly at the table was not who she claimed to be. Maya Carter was actually Evelyn Thompson, the acting director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. For months, Evelyn had gone undercover, embedding herself in communities where racial profiling ran rampant. Her mission? To expose corruption within law enforcement and shine a light on systemic racism that too often went unchecked. Evelyn had carefully chosen her cover identity, crafting a persona that would make her blend seamlessly into situations where biases were likely to surface. As Maya, she presented herself as a struggling single mother, someone who might attract suspicion simply because of her race and socioeconomic status. And it worked. Within weeks, she found herself targeted by overzealous officers eager to prove themselves by cracking down on so-called troublemakers. On the night of her supposed arrest, Evelyn had deliberately walked past a boutique, knowing full well that her mere presence might raise eyebrows. True to form, Officers Daniels and Grayson arrived shortly after, accusing her of attempting to steal merchandise. Though Evelyn knew she hadn't committed any crime, she played along, allowing herself to be handcuffed and taken to the station. Every step of the way, she documented everything: their tone, their body language, the dismissive way they treated her. It was all part of the plan. Now here she was in a courtroom filled with people who saw her only as a criminal. The officers, seated confidently in the back row, exchanged smug grins as the trial began. They leaned toward each other, whispering jokes about how people like her thought they were smarter than the system. Their laughter echoed softly, a cruel reminder of the disdain they held for those they deemed beneath them. As the prosecutor stood up to deliver his opening statement, Evelyn kept her focus razor-sharp. She listened intently, analyzing every word, every pause, every emphasis. He painted a vivid picture of a defiant suspect who refused to cooperate, framing her actions as proof of guilt. The jury nodded along, some scribbling notes, others casting judgmental glances in Evelyn's direction. When it came time for cross-examination, Sarah did her best to challenge the prosecution's claims, but her inexperience showed. She stumbled over questions, struggling to find weaknesses in the officer's testimony. Evelyn, however, remained composed. She knew exactly when to interject, offering subtle corrections or clarifications that planted seeds of doubt in the minds of those listening. Each response was calculated, designed to chip away at the narrative being built around her. Despite her efforts, the officers continued to mock her under their breath. One of them muttered loudly enough for nearby spectators to hear, "She's probably memorized some fancy lines from TV shows. Thinks she can outsmart us." The comment drew chuckles from a few people nearby, but Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she allowed herself a faint smile, knowing that the truth was about to come crashing down on them, and it would be far more devastating than anything they could imagine. The tension in the room grew palpable as the trial progressed. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Even the judge seemed intrigued, occasionally glancing at Evelyn with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. No one knew what was coming next, but soon the facade would crumble and the real battle would begin. The courtroom was eerily quiet as Officer Daniels took the stand. His chest puffed out with pride. He adjusted his uniform and cleared his throat, ready to recount the events of that fateful night. He spoke with exaggerated confidence, painting himself as a hero who had stopped a dangerous criminal in her tracks. According to him, it had been a routine patrol when they received a call about suspicious activity near a high-end boutique. When they arrived, they spotted Maya, though he called her the suspect, lingering outside the store, acting nervously. She was pacing back and forth, Daniels explained, his voice steady but laced with condescension. When we approached her, she immediately started to walk away. We asked her to stop, but she refused. That's when we knew something wasn't right. He paused for dramatic effect, glancing at the jury to ensure they were hanging on his every word. We gave chase, and after a brief struggle, we managed to detain her. His partner, Officer Grayson, sat behind him, nodding vigorously in agreement. Occasionally, he chimed in with additional details, embellishing the story to make it sound more dramatic. She tried to resist, Grayson added, leaning forward slightly in his seat. Kept saying she hadn't done anything wrong, but we found stolen items in her bag. Clear evidence, if you ask me. Evelyn listened intently, her face unreadable. She didn't flinch or react visibly to their accusations, though inside her mind raced. Every lie they told only strengthened her resolve. These men weren't just fabricating a story. They were perpetuating a system that thrived on stereotypes and prejudice. Her hands remained clasped tightly on the table, projecting calmness even as her thoughts churned with determination. Sarah, the public defender, struggled to counter their testimony. She asked questions hesitantly, unsure how to challenge the officer's version of events without seeming confrontational. "Did you see my client take anything from the store?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Or did you simply assume she was guilty because of where she was standing?" Daniel smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. "We don't need to see someone commit a crime to know they're up to no good," he replied smugly. Her behavior spoke volumes. People like her always have excuses. The phrase "people like her" hung heavy in the air, drawing murmurs from the spectators. Evelyn's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she kept her composure. She knew exactly what Daniels meant by those words, and she also knew that such attitudes were the very reason she had taken on this mission in the first place. These officers saw her not as an individual but as part of a group they had already judged and condemned. They didn't care about facts or fairness. All that mattered to them was maintaining control. When it came time for Evelyn to testify, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Sarah introduced her cautiously, reminding the court that Maya Carter, her client, was entitled to share her side of the story. As Evelyn rose to her feet, there was a collective intake of breath. For the first time, she stepped fully into the spotlight, commanding attention without uttering a single word. "Ms. Carter," Sarah began, "can you tell us what happened on the night of your arrest?" Evelyn nodded, speaking slowly and deliberately. "I was walking home after visiting a friend," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I passed by the boutique, but I didn't go inside. I didn't touch anything. When the officers approached me, I stopped immediately and cooperated fully. I didn't run, and I certainly didn't resist." Her words were simple yet powerful, cutting through the web of lies spun by Daniels and Grayson. But Evelyn wasn't done yet. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze fixed on the jury. Officer Daniels mentioned my behavior earlier. Let me explain something about behavior. When you grow up being followed in stores because of the color of your skin, when you're pulled over for no reason other than the car you drive, when you learn early on that running sometimes feels safer than staying, you adapt. You carry that weight with you everywhere you go. So yes, maybe I looked nervous that night, but nervous doesn't mean guilty. The room fell silent. Some jurors exchanged uneasy glances, while others scribbled furiously in their notebooks. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sensing that Evelyn's testimony was striking a chord. Meanwhile, Daniels and Grayson snickered quietly, mocking her response under their breath. One of them muttered loudly enough for nearby spectators to hear, "Yeah, sure, blame society for your bad choices." What the officers failed to realize, however, was that every laugh, every sneer, and every dismissive comment was being captured, not just by the court stenographer, but also by hidden microphones strategically placed throughout the room. Evelyn's team had anticipated moments like these, knowing that the officers' arrogance would eventually betray them. Outside the courthouse, federal agents monitored the live feed, waiting patiently for the right opportunity to intervene. Back. In the courtroom, Evelyn seized the moment to push further. Under the guise of clarifying minor details, she challenged the officer's account piece by piece. "You said you found stolen items in my bag," she said, turning toward Daniels. "Can you describe exactly what those items were? And can you confirm whether any security footage exists showing me taking them?" Daniels hesitated, caught off guard by the specificity of her question. He glanced at Grayson, who shrugged helplessly. It was jewelry," Daniels stammered. "Expensive stuff. As for footage, I'm sure the store has cameras, but we didn't review them personally." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Interesting," she said softly. Because the boutique owner later confirmed that nothing was missing from the store that night. No inventory loss, no reports filed. So where exactly did these stolen items come from? The prosecutor jumped to his feet, objecting vehemently. "Your Honor, this line of questioning is irrelevant," he exclaimed. But the damage was done. Doubt had crept into the minds of the jurors, planting seeds that would soon grow into cracks in the prosecution's case. As Evelyn returned to her seat, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of satisfaction. She could feel the tide turning, the fragile foundation of lies beginning to crumble. Yet she knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The officers still held power in this room, and their mockery continued unabated. What they didn't realize was that their arrogance would soon lead to their undoing, and Evelyn was prepared to make sure of it. The tension in the courtroom reached a crescendo as the trial moved closer to its climax. Spectators exchanged whispers, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Even the judge seemed uneasy, glancing repeatedly at the clock as if willing the day to end. But Evelyn remained steadfast, her focus unwavering. She had waited months for this moment, and now, with every passing second, she grew closer to achieving justice, not just for herself but for countless others who had suffered at the hands of systemic bias. Just as the prosecutor was preparing to deliver his closing argument, a sudden commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swung open with a loud creak, drawing everyone's attention. A group of sharply dressed individuals strode in, their presence commanding immediate respect. Leading them was Deputy Attorney General Marcus Reed, a towering figure with an air of authority that silenced even the faintest whisper in the room. His expression was stern, his steps deliberate, and in his hands, he carried a thick folder, marked confidential. The judge, startled by the interruption, raised a hand to halt proceedings. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice sharp but tinged with curiosity. Marcus approached the bench without hesitation, handing over the folder to the judge. "Your Honor," he began, his tone firm yet respectful, "we have critical information that directly impacts this case. With your permission, I'd like to address the court." The judge hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He opened the folder, scanning its contents quickly. As he read, his eyebrows furrowed, and his lips pressed into a thin line. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up, addressing the crowded room. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears there are extenuating circumstances surrounding this case. Ms. Carter—" He paused, glancing toward Evelyn, who remained seated with an unreadable expression. "Is not who she claims to be. She is, in fact, Special Agent Evelyn Thompson, Acting Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This entire proceeding is part of an ongoing investigation into allegations of misconduct and discriminatory practices within certain branches of law enforcement." The announcement hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by frantic whispers. People turned to look at Evelyn, their eyes wide with disbelief. Even Sarah, her public defender, gaped at her client, utterly stunned. For months, Evelyn had played her role flawlessly, keeping her true identity hidden from everyone, including those closest to her. Evelyn stood slowly, her movements deliberate. She removed the wig she had been wearing, revealing her natural hair styled in sleek waves. Next, she took off her glasses, folding them neatly before placing them on the table. The transformation was subtle, yet striking. Gone was the timid defendant. In her place stood a poised, commanding woman radiating confidence and power. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of each person briefly before settling on Officers Daniels and Grayson. For the first time since the trial began, the two officers were silent. Their smirks vanished, replaced by expressions of shock and confusion. They exchanged panicked glances, their earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of realization. Evelyn allowed herself a small, triumphant smile as she addressed the court. "You thought I was powerless," she said, her voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly across the room. "You thought I was someone you could dismiss without consequence. Today, I'm here to show you just how wrong you were." Her words sent a shiver through the courtroom. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every syllable. Reporters scrambled to jot down notes while cameras clicked frantically, capturing the historic moment. The atmosphere crackled with tension, a mix of awe, fear, and anticipation. Marcus stepped forward, taking the floor. "This operation has been months in the making," he explained, his voice resonating with authority. Special Agent Thompson embedded herself in situations where racial profiling and systemic bias are most prevalent. Her goal was to expose corruption from within, to shine a light on practices that have long gone unchecked. He gestured toward the officers, whose faces had turned pale. "Through audio recordings, body cam footage, and witness statements, we have uncovered evidence of falsified reports, discriminatory behavior, and abuse of power. These men, and others like them, have targeted individuals based on race, fabricating charges and manipulating evidence to secure convictions. Their actions are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a much larger problem." As Marcus spoke, federal agents distributed copies of key documents to the judge, the jury, and the prosecution team. The materials included transcripts of conversations between Daniels and Grayson, recorded during their whispered exchanges in the courtroom. There were also surveillance videos showing their interactions with Evelyn on the night of her arrest, proving beyond doubt that no crime had occurred. Every lie they had told unraveled before their very eyes. The officers' arrogance, once their defining trait, now worked against them. Their laughter, their mocking comments, their dismissive attitudes, all of it had been captured and preserved as evidence. The same arrogance that had made them feel untouchable had sealed their fate. Evelyn stepped closer to the stand, her gaze locking onto Daniels and Grayson. "You mocked me," she said, her tone calm but laced with steel. "You laughed at my testimony, dismissed my experience, and reduced me to a stereotype. But let me remind you of something. Justice isn't blind, it sees everything, and so do we." Her statement reverberated through the room, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances, some visibly shaken by the revelations. Spectators murmured among themselves, their initial shock giving way to outrage. Outside the courthouse, news crews broadcast live updates, spreading the story far and wide. Within minutes, social media exploded with reactions, as people across the country grappled with the implications of what they were witnessing. The judge called for a recess, instructing the jury to disregard previous testimonies and focus solely on the newly presented evidence. As the courtroom emptied, Daniels and Grayson slumped in their seats, their confidence shattered. They whispered urgently to their attorney, who looked grimly at the stack of documents in front of him. It was clear that their defense would crumble under the weight of irrefutable proof. Meanwhile, Evelyn stood quietly beside Marcus, watching the chaos unfold. Though she had achieved her objective, she didn't allow herself to celebrate. Instead, she reflected on the broader significance of the moment. This wasn't just about exposing two corrupt officers. It was about dismantling a system that enabled such behavior to persist. It was about holding institutions accountable and demanding change, not just for herself, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. As the crowd dispersed, reporters swarmed around Evelyn and Marcus, firing questions rapidly. "Agent Thompson, what's next for this investigation?" one asked. "Will there be more arrests?" Another pressed. Evelyn held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "We're only getting started," she said firmly. "This is not about individual accountability alone. It's about reforming a broken system. Justice requires transparency, integrity, and action. And we intend to deliver all three." With that, she turned and walked out of the courtroom, her head held high. Behind her, the world buzzed with anticipation, eager to see what would come next. The trial may have reached its turning point, but Evelyn knew that the real work was just beginning. Within hours of Evelyn's dramatic reveal in the courtroom, the story exploded across every news outlet, social media platform, and dinner table conversation. The footage of Officers Daniels and Grayson laughing at Evelyn during her testimony went viral, sparking outrage nationwide. Clips of Evelyn's calm yet powerful speech about justice reverberated through living rooms, classrooms, and workplaces, igniting debates about systemic racism and police accountability. What had started as a seemingly routine court case had morphed into a national reckoning. For Daniels and Grayson, the fallout was swift and merciless. Their superiors suspended them immediately, citing the overwhelming evidence against them. Internal Affairs launched an urgent investigation into their conduct, pulling records from years of arrests to identify patterns of misconduct. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover disturbing trends: falsified reports, exaggerated charges, and disproportionately high arrest rates among Black individuals in their precinct. Each discovery painted a damning picture of two officers who had abused their power with impunity. The public outcry grew louder as more details emerged. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for all and accountability now." Community leaders, activists, and civil rights organizations joined forces, organizing rallies and town hall meetings to demand systemic reform. Social media campaigns amplified voices that had long been ignored, flooding platforms with stories of similar experiences, people sharing how they too had been targeted, humiliated, or wrongfully arrested because of their race. Evelyn's mission had struck a nerve, awakening a collective call for change. Meanwhile, Evelyn herself became both a symbol and a lightning rod. She held a press conference alongside Deputy Attorney General Marcus Reed, standing before a sea of reporters and cameras. Dressed in a crisp suit, she exuded authority and grace. Her demeanor was calm but resolute, her words carefully chosen yet deeply impactful. "This isn't just about two bad apples," she began, addressing the crowd. "It's about dismantling a rotten tree. For decades, we've allowed systems, built on prejudice and inequality, to thrive unchecked. We've told ourselves it's easier to blame individuals than to confront the truth about our institutions. But today we say, enough is enough." She detailed the findings of her months-long undercover operation, presenting audio recordings, body cam footage, and witness statements that exposed the officers' misconduct. One particularly damning clip featured Daniels boasting about teaching lessons to those people, using language so inflammatory it left many viewers seething with anger. Another showed Grayson dismissing complaints from community members mocking their claims of racial profiling as excuses. Evelyn also shared statistics highlighting disparities in policing practices. In their precinct alone, Black residents were 3 times more likely to be stopped, searched, and arrested than their white counterparts, even though crime rates were comparable across demographics. These numbers weren't anomalies, they were part of a broader pattern that stretched far beyond this single courtroom. Her speech resonated deeply, inspiring hope and action in equal measure. People took to the streets, demanding policy changes such as mandatory bias training, independent oversight boards, and stricter consequences for officers found guilty of misconduct. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement agencies. School districts incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curricula, ensuring future generations would grow up aware of these issues. But amidst the progress, challenges remained. Some critics dismissed Evelyn's efforts as politically motivated, accusing her of targeting law enforcement unfairly. Others argued that focusing solely on Daniels and Grayson risked overshadowing deeper structural problems. Evelyn acknowledged these concerns, emphasizing that real change required collaboration, not division. "We can honor the brave men and women who serve with integrity while holding accountable those who betray the badge," she said during one interview. "This isn't about pitting communities against police. It's about building trust where it's been broken." Back in the courtroom, Daniels and Grayson faced mounting pressure. Their trial became a spectacle, drawing national attention as prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence proving their guilt. Audio recordings captured their cruel remarks about Evelyn, while surveillance footage contradicted their claims of resistance and theft. Witnesses testified about similar encounters with the officers, painting a consistent picture of discriminatory behavior. Despite their attempts to defend themselves, the evidence was overwhelming. Both men were convicted of perjury, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. While neither served extensive prison sentences, they received punishments that ensured they could never work in law enforcement again. Their badges were stripped, their pensions revoked, and their names forever tarnished. For many, this outcome felt like a small but meaningful victory, a step toward justice in a much larger fight. For Evelyn, the experience solidified her commitment to driving change from within the system. Promoted to permanent FBI director shortly after the trial, she spearheaded initiatives aimed at bridging divides between marginalized communities and law enforcement. Under her leadership, the Bureau launched programs to recruit diverse talent, foster dialogue, and promote ethical practices. She traveled extensively, meeting with community leaders, officers, and policymakers to discuss solutions and strategies for reform. Her efforts earned widespread acclaim, though she remained humble, often deflecting praise onto the countless activists, advocates, and everyday citizens who had fought tirelessly for justice long before her involvement. "I'm not a hero," she once said during an award ceremony. "I'm simply someone who refused to stay silent when I saw injustice." Real heroes are the ones who keep pushing forward, even when no one is watching. Years later, the courthouse where it all began underwent a transformation. Renamed the Evelyn Thompson Justice Center, it stood as a testament to her courage and determination. Inside its walls hung a plaque bearing a quote from her iconic press conference: "Justice isn't blind. It sees everything. And so must we." Though the road ahead remained fraught with obstacles, Evelyn's actions reminded the world that even in the darkest moments, light could still break through. Her story inspired countless others to speak up, stand firm, and believe in the possibility of a fairer, more equitable society. And as the nation continued its journey toward healing, one thing became clear: Evelyn Thompson's legacy would endure for generations to come. Months after the trial of officers Daniels and Grayson concluded, their convictions sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies nationwide. While neither officer served lengthy prison sentences, Daniels received 2 years in a minimum security facility, and Grayson was given probation. Their punishments carried weight beyond mere jail time. Both men were permanently barred from working in any capacity related to public safety, their careers effectively over. Their names became synonymous with corruption and prejudice, cited in training seminars as cautionary tales of what happens when power is misused. The impact of their downfall extended far beyond their personal fates. The case sparked a wave of self-reflection within police departments across the country. Internal affairs divisions launched sweeping investigations into past cases, re-examining arrests, charges, and disciplinary records for signs of bias or misconduct. In several cities, these reviews uncovered troubling patterns similar to those seen in Daniels and Grayson's precinct. Officers implicated in wrongdoing faced consequences ranging from suspensions to criminal charges, sending a clear message: accountability was no longer optional. For Evelyn Thompson, now officially appointed as the permanent director of the FBI, the victory was bittersweet. She knew that dismantling systemic racism required more than punishing individual offenders. It demanded systemic change. To that end, she spearheaded a series of groundbreaking initiatives aimed at rebuilding trust between marginalized communities and law enforcement. One of her first acts was establishing a national task force dedicated to rooting out discriminatory practices within police forces. Composed of experts in criminal justice reform, civil rights advocacy, and community engagement, the task force worked tirelessly to develop policies promoting transparency and fairness. Evelyn also championed programs designed to diversify law enforcement ranks. Recognizing that representation mattered, she pushed for recruitment campaigns targeting underrepresented groups, including Black, Indigenous, and Latino communities. These efforts weren't just about filling quotas. They were about creating environments where officers reflected the populations they served, fostering mutual understanding and respect. Training modules introduced during her tenure emphasized cultural sensitivity, de-escalation techniques, and ethical decision-making, equipping officers with tools to navigate complex situations without resorting to bias or force. Her work didn't stop there. Evelyn understood that lasting change required collaboration between law enforcement and the communities they policed. Under her leadership, the FBI partnered with grassroots organizations to host town hall meetings, forums, and workshops where citizens could voice concerns directly to officials. These events often grew heated, with participants airing grievances about decades of mistreatment and mistrust. But Evelyn welcomed the dialogue, believing it was essential to healing fractured relationships. "We can't fix what we don't acknowledge," she told attendees at one such gathering. "Your voices matter, your pain matters, and together, we will find solutions." Her approach earned both admiration and criticism. Supporters hailed her as a visionary leader unafraid to confront uncomfortable truths. Critics accused her of being overly idealistic, arguing that systemic issues couldn't be solved overnight. Yet Evelyn remained undeterred, reminding skeptics that progress was rarely linear. "Change takes time," she said in an interview, "but silence takes lives. We owe it to future generations to keep pushing forward, even when the path feels uncertain." Years passed, and Evelyn's influence continued to shape the landscape of American justice. Her name became synonymous with integrity and resilience, inspiring countless young people, especially women of color, to pursue careers in law enforcement and public service. Many credited her with paving the way for a new era of accountability, one where badges represented not just authority but responsibility. In recognition of her contributions, the courthouse where the trial took place underwent a profound transformation. Renamed the Evelyn Thompson Justice Center, it stood as a monument to her courage and determination. Inside its walls, visitors found exhibits chronicling her undercover mission, complete with audio recordings, surveillance footage, and first-hand accounts from those involved. A plaque near the entrance bore a quote from her iconic press conference: "Justice isn't blind, it sees everything, and so must we." The center quickly became a hub for education and activism, hosting lectures, panel discussions, and youth programs focused on social justice. Students toured its halls, learning about the importance of standing up against injustice and using their voices to effect change. For many, it served as a reminder that heroes aren't born, they're made through acts of bravery and conviction. Though Evelyn eventually stepped down from her role as FBI director to focus on mentoring the next generation of leaders, her legacy endured. She traveled the world sharing her story and advocating for reforms on global stages. Whether addressing the United Nations or speaking to small community groups, her message remained consistent. True justice requires collective effort. No one person can fix everything, she often said, but each of us has a part to play. Together we can build a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. As the years rolled on, society began to shift, not perfectly, but perceptibly. Police departments implemented body cameras and independent oversight boards, ensuring greater accountability. Schools incorporated lessons on systemic racism into their curricula, teaching children to recognize and challenge inequality. Activists kept pressure on lawmakers, securing landmark legislation aimed at protecting civil rights and reducing disparities in the justice system. Through it all, Evelyn remained a guiding light, her unwavering belief in humanity's potential serving as a beacon of hope. Though challenges persisted and setbacks occasionally threatened to derail progress, she reminded everyone that the fight for justice was never truly over. It was a marathon, not a sprint, a journey requiring patience, perseverance, and faith in the possibility of a better tomorrow. And so Evelyn's story came full circle. What had started as a covert mission to expose corruption evolved into a movement that transcended borders, industries, and generations. Her courage inspired millions to confront uncomfortable truths, demand accountability, and strive for equity. While the road ahead remained long and fraught with obstacles, one thing was certain: Evelyn Thompson had ignited a spark that would continue to burn brightly for years to come.